Good evening, Cesar, and thank you very much for giving up some of your time to talk to us this evening. Well, it's this evening here in the UK, I suppose midday with you.
Yes, that is correct. Thank you for having me. This is an honor.
Brilliant. Well, Cesar, I wanted to start just if you could briefly explain how what it means to be a dreamer and how your own background to match that category as such.
Well, yeah, the term dreamer originates from immigrants who come to the United States to live out what's known as the American dream. So in my case, my parents brought me here when I was 5 years old. So I was born in Mexico, but I've grown up here in Nashville, Tennessee, my whole life. And for us, we're called dreamers because we still dream about the American dream. And in that sense, we're pursuing that and knowing that my parents brought me here to live a better life, to have more opportunities than I would have had I stayed back in Mexico or my country of origin.
And is it the case that you're neither, in a sense, you're neither Mexican then nor fully American in terms of being an American citizen?
Yes, that's a very common feeling among dreamers, and it's just
But
well not having.
that's your legal situation as well, is it?
Yeah, because legally I'm still a Mexican citizen, but if I were to move back to Mexico, among my relatives and even family, or yeah, just family and friends, it'd be difficult because there's the Spanish I speak at home with my parents. I don't it's not the same Spanish that they speak back home. I would stick out, and not having grown up there and lived there my whole life like I have here, it's in a sense like I'm not quite Mexican enough for some people back home. And here in the United States, well, obviously it's the reverse of that. It's that even though I've assimilated to the culture, I started here in kindergarten not speaking the language, tested out of ELL in under 2 years, and just
Sorry, that what did
ELL. It's English Language Learners. It was a
okay.
program that nowadays, I mean, they changed the name, I think, but it's basically for students whose native language isn't English, and just kind of catch them up to speed because the language is a big barrier for a lot of young kids that don't know how to speak English come in to the American
So
schools.
over 2 years, you then caught up to be able to speak English fluently
Well enough, yeah,
and
well enough.
well enough to cope with your studies and so on.
I still struggled as far as English and language arts goes, just because of the language barriers. There's certain things that were foreign to me at the time, things like idioms or metaphors, similes, that kind of stuff that just kind of doesn't quite translate out into Spanish. So I started off in the remedial English classes, and by the time I reached the fourth grade, I was actually in the advanced classes. So in a lot of sense,
Fourth grade. What age is fourth grade?
uh, fourth grade, I believe that it was around the time I want to say 10.
So by 10, you were
10 or 11, yeah. I had caught up and gotten to the point where I was in the accelerated English classes. And that was a really big milestone for me because by that point, I had actually lost my Spanish, my Spanish accent that I used to have when I spoke English. Nowadays, a lot of people tell me, well, your English is really good. And I said, well, thank you. I've lived here most of my life, so that's to be expected.
And so do you feel American now? Would you, how
The phrase I hear a lot is that I'm American in almost every sense of the word but one. And that, I guess that perfectly describes my situation because it's the only thing that's holding me back right now is my status. But in terms of yeah, how I feel, I would say yes. I definitely feel more American than Mexican nowadays. And I mean, I still hold on to my cultural values, my heritage, my parents. I only speak to them in Spanish. I try to do the same with my younger brother because I know just how big it is to not forget that.
and how your parents brought you over? So how did they get you there to the US?
I was very young when it happened, but from what I could remember, my dad basically had to pay a coyote to get us across the
Is the
border.
sort of guy who organizes transport.
Yes, yes, and yeah, it's the details I'm not too keen on them, or I was too young to fully understand what was happening, but from what I can remember, we arrived here by car. But the original plan, from what I've been told, was that we were going to be brought in by plane.
All right.
And but the reason we ended up not doing that was because the coyote my dad was talking to at the time wanted to split up my family, and my dad was not he was not for that idea. He feared that if they separated me and my brother from my mom and my dad, that we might not be able to remain together or reunite once we were here in the United States. So we ended up going. He ended up finding someone else to bring us over all together, because well, this is one of those things where families always played a huge role in my life, and to be separated from my parents at that young age, my dad definitely knew that it would cause a lot of trauma, to me and my brother if we
Well,
weren't
yeah, you
able to.
were 5, weren't you? I can imagine. Yeah, I have a granddaughter who's 5, and I can imagine if she was separated off, she'd be distraught.
And you see a lot of that nowadays with what happened with the children that were detained and separated from their families here in the United States, and how after being reunited there was that psychological trauma because the kids didn't, in a sense, they thought that their parents had abandoned them. And it's really sad. If I don't know if you've seen any of those videos, or
Yeah.
and thinking back on it now, that could have been me and my brother. I was 5 at the time. My younger brother Julio, he was 2. So
I
he
mean,
so yeah, for him, and it was very dangerous because prior to that, my dad had been living here in the United States, but it took him 13 tries to finally get here.
with
And
his family.
and then no, by himself.
Oh, I'm
He
sorry.
uh, he came by himself, I believe, in 90, 96, 95, and lived here. And he would send money back. But when he came back, he had more money, and it actually was very traumatic for him because when I was 4, I got really sick, and I was literally dying in his arms as he was rushing me to the hospital, where the doctors told him that there was nothing they could do for me because I was inevitably going to die. And for whatever reason, divine or otherwise, I survived. I remained alive. But for my dad, I can only imagine how traumatic that would have been, because after having come to the United States, having made a living there, he has all this money that he previously didn't have, and there was nothing he could do for me. And I think it was around that time where he decided to bring the whole family to the United States. And the fact that we that it only took us one try to make it over, it was a blessing.
So, and but he was very determined. And I suppose, yeah, I mean, we come back, the American dream. Was he drawn by that as well? I mean,
There was a lot of that. We had cousins here. We have family here that that they're citizens, and well, I guess residents. I'm not sure if they're citizens already, but we had connections, and my dad had heard that they needed workers here, specifically in construction, and that's why he set out to come here, specifically to Nashville, Tennessee, because of just the job prospects. And and it uh, th- that's mostly why we ended up where we did. But another part of it was the economy here, back in Mexico, because it wasn't doing so well. My dad, we only got to see him maybe on Sundays. That's because he would work construction. He'd have to go to the city. He would sleep at the job site. And with the money he was getting paid, there wasn't enough money for him to go back home and take the bus back to work the next day, every day.
so
So
you lived in the countryside, do you? Some distance.
yes, yes, we lived. Yeah, where we lived, it was more in the countryside. A lot of the people there is mostly farms and ranches. But yeah, my dad. Yeah, that's where we were living. And my dad, from what he's told me, construction workers don't get paid that well in Mexico, or at least back then they did. I'm not too certain about now, but it was one of those things where I was really happy to see him on Sundays. but at the same time, we would sometimes not have enough money for basic groceries. And for him, that kind of led him to pursue the American dream, in a sense, to
And
just want to get this more.
and what do you think? What do you see as the American dream?
Well, for me, growing up, and I'll be completely honest, I actually made it one of my lifelong goals to go to the university to get a degree, and have a job that wasn't as physically demanding as my father's. Uh, and I was in second grade when I set that goal for myself. So for me, the American dream was trying to make it to that point, make it to where I could get a degree, and start working somewhere where I didn't where it wasn't as physically demanding. And don't get me wrong, because I've worked construction with my father, and I've seen firsthand how how to value that uh, just work, uh, and having seen it firsthand and experienced it myself, I know that it is very taxing. And I wouldn't. My dad, well, my dad's main idea behind that was to kind of just show me and prepare me if worse comes to worst, because nothing for us is guaranteed. There's no certainty, and that's one of the very big things that just kind of looms over you. And you try not to think about it, because at the end of the day, you still need to live your life. You need to keep moving on and pursue your goals, and try to find some measure of success. And for me, that's I guess that's all part of it. But for me, the American dream is it's all these opportunities I've been given. It's yeah, it's the education I have now. It's really where I am now. I mean, I recently became the manager of the engineering department at my company, and I
Yeah.
feel like all of that it ties into it. And yeah.
Can I ask you then, given your lack of status as as an American citizen, how has that sort of handicapped your ability to fulfill this dream and get to where you've got to?
Yeah. Well, for me, it mostly has to do with the uncertainty of what could happen next for me, because that's one of the reasons I actually chose to stay with the company that I've been with, whereas I have friends who are also dreamers who they're at their third company by now. And for me, it's just one of those things where I'd rather stay where I'm at right now, and it limits what my future plans end up being.
And the company, it's not illegal for the company you're working at to employ you as a.
No. Well, actually, in my case, as is the case with many dreamers, we have DACA, which is Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and part of that is that you get deferred action, which which guarantees that you won't be deported for a set amount of time. And on top of that, if they accept your application, you could also get a work permit. So in my case, I have a work permit, but that work permit is set to expire in the fall of this year.
In the fall of this year. And how does that relate to the deferred action? You know, when is that action deferred to as well?
Well, that's just the thing. The program right now, as I think it was 2016, or but that was a year that they stopped accepting new applications for DACA, and they would only accept renewals. And it's been tied up in the court systems even now, and they're still trying to decide whether the Supreme Court is gonna accept it as one of the cases that they will hear out or not. And as of now, it's been deferred to, I guess, the fall, where they'll make their decision. And yeah, it's kind of scary, because I sent in my renewal papers last year in the fall, and they typically recommend you do it 3 to 6 months before it's set to expire. But me and my brother chose to send it a whole year early, and we're still waiting to hear back. So there's a chance that we could get renewed for 2 more years, which would be ideal. And there's also a chance that we could not. So as far
And
as
what happens if you're not renewed in the fall? What happens to you then?
well, to be honest, I'm not exactly sure. It's one of those things that I'd have to figure out as I went along. I'm told that there is a way to, as far as employment goes, that there is a possible way to work as maybe a contractor, where you contract yourself out to the company and you're still able to work legally. But I'm not too familiar with the details on that. Um, but
So
yeah, like I said, I'm not entirely sure.
yeah, but it's very uncertain what this all will mean. What other impacts? I mean, for instance, in health, can you get health insurance? What all the other sort of basic things that you need in the US? How does your status affect that?
Well, as far as any government aid, I don't qualify for any of that. So I don't. There's a lot of loans that I don't qualify for, that I didn't qualify for when I initially started at Lipscomb University, and it was really emotionally, it was a setback because you work so hard. I graduated top 10 in my class, and and I it almost seemed like all that work academically, uh, it it didn't matter. And yeah, so for a time, that emotionally that set me back. But it was my parents really who brought me back and showed me just how far they were willing to go so that I could pursue my education. They were willing to send me back to Mexico to go to to attend one of the universities back home and pursue my studies there. And yeah, I'm not entitled to anything as far as financial aid goes. That's government based. FAFSA, which is the one here.
And
Any
health insurance? Can you get health insurance?
That depends on the company. If the company offers it, I can apply for those benefits. But as far as as far as financial aid, uh, any of that I'm not entitled to that. I do have to, and this is one of the big things. I do have to declare my taxes, uh, and and a lot of people assume that as a dreamer, as someone who's not an American citizen or a resident, that I don't have to do taxes. I've done my taxes since 2015 when I started interning as an undergrad. And yeah, that's one of the things. So I'm not entitled to any Social Security benefits, any of that's taken out of my check every well, for us it's every week.
So you're paying tax, but you're not entitled to any of the benefits that normal taxpayers would get.
That is correct.
So it seems, seeing this from a distance, the fate of the Dreamers have become almost a political football between the Democrats and the Republicans.
There's definitely a big feeling among a lot of dreamers that right now we're just a bargaining chip, and we're kind of left up to the decisions of others. Like our futures are dependent on that, and it's very scary when you think about it that way, because we're not entirely sure what could happen. And as a lot of things that have happened already, it's very scary to think about it. But we try to remain positive. We try to stay as informed as we can. And a lot of us, we actually form groups and try to talk to our representatives, talk to whoever we can that's in a position to to help us out to voice our opinions and to keep us in mind.
And how has this affected your sort of belief in the American dream? Because it seems that you could say the politics are quite cynical. The whole, and also you might say in the current context, that the nature of what the American dream is hugely contested with, you know, the Make America Great Again, as if we have, you know, America has to go backwards to some historical idyll to find its sort of greatness, its dream. Is this the America that you believed in?
Not entirely. No, it's yeah. At times it can be. It does negatively impact me and how I feel about it. But it's complicated because although this isn't the American dream that I was that I had hoped for, that I was expecting. Well, I've lived here most of my life. This is all I've ever really known, and in my mind, I'm just trying to I'm just trying to remain here and help out my community, help out those around me as best as I can with the tools I have at my disposal. But it does kind of seem like like we're fighting an uphill battle, because with the political climate being what it is now, there's definitely a lot of resentment that's there. But I try not to let that get to me, because, well, I want to stay. I want to continue working here, if possible. And if it ultimately isn't, then I can at least say I tried my best.
And what about getting politically active? Have you thought of doing that? Are you?
I have. I've actually been part of since 2012. I've been part of a group. I've been a youth group, which is based which the organization that helped us start off and start the group is called the Tennessee Immigrant and Refugee Rights Coalition. And they kind of they got a group of high school, college students together, and just we started the conversation off with what we could do, and get informed as to what legislative policies are in play that could affect us both negatively and positively. And this was all started right after there was a campaign in 2008 here in Tennessee to push for the DREAM Act. And after I believe it was a couple, it was 1 or 2 votes shy of passing, and that would have made a huge difference for us. But since it didn't, we had to kind of rally and regroup. And I was not too involved with that group, but that group went on to form the group that I became involved with Turk.
Right. So here you are, facing an uncertain future, and how do you keep yourself going?
Well, I think about my family. I think about all that I've accomplished, and I want to. Well, I do it mostly for my family, if I'm being quite honest, because last year I helped my parents buy a house, and for me that was that it was really emotional, just because my parents, with their credit and with their status, it was kind of hard. But with me having good credit and having DACA, I was kind of somewhere in the middle between where they were and where a normal citizen would be, and provided with just the right opportunities to make it happen. So I ended up finding a bank that would be willing to give me a loan, and we started looking for houses. And right now my family, we're living at that house. And for me, that's one of the big things that keeps me going. Like I said, I'm the oldest of 4 brothers. My brother Julio, who was also born in Mexico, right now he'll be 23 in 2 days. My brother Diego, who was born here, he's 19 years old, and he's a freshman at East Tennessee University. And my youngest brother, he is 8 years old. And for me, it's just part of, it also comes with being an older sibling, is that I want to set a good example for them. I want to show them that despite challenges and obstacles that you might face in life, that your hard work will pay off. And even if the future isn't certain, that doesn't necessarily mean we should give up. And at the contrary, we should keep going and maybe prove people wrong.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Cesar. That is a very inspiring story, and I wish you all the very best, that your DACA gets extended or your situation works out.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.